It was a chilly Tuesday morning in Pinewood Grove. This was a quiet little neighborhood where nothing exciting ever seemed to happen, at least that's what everyone thought. The houses sat in neat rows with green lawns and white fences. Birds chirped in the trees and the air smelled like fresh grass and cold wind. Kids rode their bikes sometimes and old folks walked their dogs. It was peaceful, boring even, but something big was about to shake things up and no one saw it coming. Say hello to Jake Riley. He was the new guy on the block. Jake had just moved into a small, cozy house at the end of Maple Street. It had a red door, a tiny porch, and a big window that looked out at the world. Jake wasn't loud or wild. He was a chill dude. He liked to keep things simple. He'd wave at people when he saw them, give a little smile, and go about his day. He didn't bother anyone, and he didn't want anyone bothering him. Jake wasn't alone, though. He had his best buddy with him, Max, his fluffy brown dog. Max had big, happy eyes and a wagging tail that never stopped. Together, they were a team. Jake brought something else with him, too, a shiny new smart heater. This wasn't just any old heater. Oh no, it was special. It was one of those cool gadgets you could turn on with your phone. Tap a button and bam, warm air filled the house. Jake loved it. On cold nights, he'd sit on his couch with Max curled up next to him, the heater humming softly, keeping everything nice and toasty. It was perfect for a guy like Jake, who just wanted a comfy home. But not everyone was happy about it. Someone was watching, someone who didn't like new people or new things messing up her perfect little world. That someone was Karen Baxter. Around here, people called her HOA Karen, but only when she couldn't hear. HOA stood for Homeowners Association, a group that made rules for the neighborhood. Karen was the boss of it. She acted like she owned the whole street, maybe even the whole town. She was tall and skinny, with sharp eyes that could spot a weed in your yard from a mile away. Her hair was always pulled back tight, and she carried a clipboard everywhere she went. That clipboard was her weapon. She'd write down every little thing she didn't like: grass too long, a bike left out, a mailbox painted the wrong color. Then she'd march over and tell you to fix it, her voice loud and bossy. Karen loved rules. She loved telling people what to do. If you broke one of her rules, she'd scribble it on her clipboard and give you a big lecture. "This is Pinewood Grove," she'd say. "We have standards." Most folks just nodded and went along with it because arguing with Karen was like arguing with a brick wall. She never gave up. She never backed down. Everyone knew her and everyone tried to stay out of her way. But Jake, he was new. He didn't know about Karen yet, and Karen, she didn't know about Jake or his secret. See, Jake wasn't just some regular guy with a dog and a heater. There was more to him than that, something big, something hidden. Nobody in Pinewood Grove had a clue, not the old man who watered his flowers every day, not the kids playing tag by the park, and definitely not Karen Baxter. Jake's secret was like a surprise waiting to pop out of a box. It was quiet now, tucked away, but it wouldn't stay that way forever. And when it came out, oh boy, it was going to flip Karen's world upside down. It all started on that chilly Tuesday morning. The sun was just peeking over the trees, painting the sky pink and orange. Jake woke up early like he always did. He stretched, yawned, and scratched Max behind the ears. "Good morning, buddy," he said with a grin. Max barked once, happy as ever. Jake pulled on a sweater, grabbed his coffee mug, and stepped onto his porch. The air was cold, and his breath made little clouds in front of his face. He looked around. Everything seemed normal. The street was quiet. A squirrel ran up a tree. A car drove by slowly. Just another day, right? Wrong. Across the street, behind a big bush, two sharp eyes were watching. Karen Baxter stood there, clipboard in hand, staring at Jake's house. She'd been up since dawn, like always, checking the neighborhood for anything out of place. She didn't trust new people. New people meant trouble. They didn't know the rule. They didn't follow her orders. And Jake, he was the newest of the new. Karen had seen him move in last week, him, his dog, and that weird box he carried inside. She didn't know what was in the box, but she didn't like it. It looked funny, different, and different was bad in Karen's book. She squinted at Jake's house now, her lips pressed into a thin line. That's when she noticed it, the shiny new smart heater. It sat by Jake's window, plugged in and ready to go. Karen didn't know it was a heater yet. To her it looked like some strange machine. Too modern, too loud maybe. She didn't like the way it gleamed in the sunlight. It didn't fit with the old-fashioned houses on Maple Street. "What is that thing?" she muttered to herself, tapping her pen on her clipboard. "He can't just put junk like that out. This is my neighborhood." Jake didn't see her watching. He was too busy sipping his coffee and petting Max. He had no idea Karen had her eye on him from day one. To him, Pinewood Grove was just a nice, quiet place to start fresh. He liked the little houses and the friendly waves from neighbors. Sure, he'd heard whispers about some lady who loved rules, but he didn't think much of it. How bad could she be? Oh, Jake, he was about to find out. Karen scribbled something on her clipboard, a note about Jake, weird machine. She didn't know what it was, but she was sure it broke some rule. Maybe it was too big, maybe it was too shiny. She'd figure it out later. For now, she just watched, her mind buzzing with plans. She'd talk to him soon. She'd set him straight. New guy or not, he'd learn to follow her rules or else. But here's the thing, Jake wasn't the kind of guy who scared easy. He'd been through stuff before, tough stuff. That's part of his secret, you see. He didn't move to Pinewood Grove just because it was pretty. He came for a reason, a big one, and that smart heater, it wasn't just for keeping warm, it had a purpose too. Karen didn't know any of this yet. She thought Jake was just some kid with a dog and a funny gadget. She thought she could boss him around like everyone else. Boy, was she wrong. The chilly Tuesday morning stretched on. Jake finished his coffee and went back inside. Max trotted after him, tail wagging. The smart heater hummed to life, filling the house with warm air. Outside, Karen stayed by her bush, watching like a hawk. She didn't like Jake, she didn't like his dog, and she really didn't like that heater. Something about it bugged her, something felt off. She couldn't explain it, but she was going to find out what he was up to. She'd make sure of it. What Karen didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Jake was ready for her. Not in a loud, fighting way. No, Jake was sneaky, quiet. He'd smile and nod, but he'd watch her right back. His secret was still hidden, locked up tight, but it wouldn't stay that way forever. Sooner or later, it'd come out. And when it did, Karen's perfect little world was going to turn into a big, messy surprise. So there they were. Jake, the chill new guy with a secret, and Karen, the rule-loving queen with her clipboard. Two people on a crash course, and neither of them knew it yet. The neighborhood was quiet for now, but not for long. Something exciting was coming, something wild. And it all started with a chilly Tuesday morning, a dog named Max, and one shiny smart heater. It all started with that smart heater. Jake's heater wasn't some boring old machine you see in every house. No way. It was special, a fancy one you could turn on with your phone. You just tap an app and boom, it starts humming, sending warm air all over the place. One night, Jake was sitting on his couch, cozy as can be. He had a mug of hot cocoa in his hands, steaming and sweet. Max, his fluffy brown dog, was snuggled up next to him, snoozing away. The smart heater kicked on with a soft buzz, filling the little house with warmth. Jake smiled. He loved that heater. It made everything feel just right. But not everyone was happy. Across the street, HOA Karen was listening. Karen Baxter, the queen of the Homeowners Association, didn't like anything new or different. And that heater, she hated it. She didn't like the sound it made, a quiet hum that floated out Jake's window. She didn't like how it looked either, all shiny and modern, sitting there by his porch. To her it was trouble, big trouble. Karen thought everything in Pinewood Grove should be perfect, her kind of perfect. And Jake's smart heater, it didn't fit her rules. The next morning, the sun was barely up when Karen made her move. She grabbed her precious HOA handbook, a little book full of all her neighborhood rules. She stuffed it under her arm, pulled on her shoes, and marched across the street. Her face was red as a ripe tomato and her eyes were narrow and mean. She stomped right up to Jake's porch, her clipboard bouncing in her hand. Jake was outside, tossing a ball for Max to chase. He saw her coming but didn't say anything. He just waited. Karen stopped at the bottom of his steps and pointed at the heater. "That noisy contraption is against the rules," she snapped. Her voice was loud and sharp, like a teacher yelling at a kid who forgot their homework. She waved her handbook in the air like it was a magic wand. "It's ugly, it's loud, and I'm reporting you." She stood there, waiting for Jake to look scared or say sorry. But Jake didn't do either. He just smiled, a small, calm smile, and scratched Max behind the ears. "It's not breaking any rules, ma'am," he said, nice and easy. "Check the handbook yourself." His voice was soft, like he didn't have a worry in the world. Oh, that made Karen mad, really mad. Her face got even redder and her eyes got even meaner. She wasn't used to people talking back. Most folks in Pinewood Grove just nodded and did what she said. But Jake, he wasn't like most folks. He wasn't scared of her handbook or her loud voice. Karen huffed, her breath puffing out in the cold air. "You think you're so smart, huh?" she grumbled. "Disrespectful kids like you don't belong here." She turned on her heel and stormed off, her shoes clacking on the sidewalk. As she went, she muttered under her breath stuff about calling the authorities and teaching him a lesson. Jake watched her go, still smiling a little. He shrugged, like it was no big deal. "Come on, Max," he said, tossing the ball again. "Let's go inside." Max barked and ran after it, happy as ever. But Jake wasn't dumb. He noticed something funny as Karen walked away. Her hands were shaking. Not a lot, just a tiny tremble, like she was nervous or scared. It was weird. Why would someone so bossy and loud be shaky? Was she mad enough to shake, or was it something else? Jake didn't say anything about it, but he tucked that little clue away in his mind. Something about Karen wasn't right. He didn't know what yet, but he'd figure it out. Inside his house, Jake sat down with Max and turned on the heater again. It hummed to life, warm air swirling around them. He sipped his cocoa and thought about Karen. She didn't scare him. He'd met people like her before, loud, pushy folks who thought they could boss everyone around. Jake didn't like fighting, though. He liked staying calm, keeping his cool. That's how he handled things, but he wasn't blind. He knew Karen wasn't going to let this go. She'd be back, and he'd be ready. Outside, Karen was already plotting. She sat in her house across the street, her clipboard on the table. She flipped through her handbook, looking for any rule she could use against Jake. Noisy machines, she mumbled. Ugly stuff by the window. She didn't find anything exact, but that didn't stop her. She'd make it work. She always did. Karen didn't like losing. She didn't like new people coming in and doing whatever they wanted. Jake and his heater were a problem, and she was going to fix it. She grabbed a pen and started writing a letter. It was an official HOA warning, fancy words on fancy paper. She wrote about the heater, calling it a disturbance and a violation. She didn't care if it was really against the rules. She scared Jake into getting rid of it. That's how she handled things. Yell loud, write letters, make people back down. It worked every time. Well, almost every time. While Karen scribbled away, Jake was watching out his window, not in an obvious way, just a quick peek now and then. He saw her shadow moving behind her curtains. He saw her light on late. She's up to something, he said to Max. Max tilted his head like he understood. Jake chuckled. Don't worry, buddy, we've got this. He didn't know what Karen was planning, but he wasn't worried, not yet. The tension was building, like a storm getting ready to break. Karen thought she had the power. She thought she could push Jake around, make him follow her rules. But Jake wasn't just some new kid with a dog and a heater. He had something up his sleeve, something Karen didn't see coming. Her hands shook for a reason. Maybe she wasn't as strong as she acted. Maybe she was hiding something, too. The neighborhood stayed quiet that day, but it wouldn't last. Karen's loud voice and Jake's calm smile were about to crash into each other. She didn't like his heater. He didn't like her rules. And that shaky little tremble in her hands, it was a clue, a tiny hint that something bigger was going on. Jake saw it. He didn't know what it meant yet, but he'd find out. Soon, the fight over a smart heater would turn into something way more exciting and way more surprising than anyone in Pinewood Grove could guess. Days went by after Karen's big scene on Jake's porch, and she wouldn't let it go. Nope, not even a little bit. That smart heater, the one Jake loved so much, was like a thorn in her side. She'd sit by her window every day, staring at it with her sharp eyes. The heater sat there by Jake's house, all shiny and humming, and Karen hated it more with every second. She'd grab her clipboard and scribble notes like a detective trying to solve a mystery. Too loud, she'd write. Too ugly. She didn't care that it wasn't really loud or ugly. She just wanted it gone. Karen didn't stop with starring and writing. Oh no, she took it further. One morning, Jake went to check his mailbox. He flipped it open, and there they were, letters, not nice ones either. They were official HOA warnings, typed up all fancy on crisp white paper. Remove that eyesore or face a fine, the letters said. It's against the rules. Jake read them and laughed a little. A fine for his heater. He shook his head and tossed the letters on his table. He wasn't scared of Karen's petty threats. To him, they were just silly pieces of paper. He wasn't going to take his heater down, not for her, not for anyone. But Jake wasn't dumb. He didn't just ignore Karen and forget about her, no way. He started watching her back. He'd peek out his window sometimes, just a quick look to see what she was up to. He'd see her packing in her yard or glaring at his house. She was like a hawk, always circling, always waiting to swoop in. Jake didn't say much about it. He didn't run around yelling or complaining. He just watched, quiet and calm, like he always was. Max would sit by his feet, wagging his tail, and Jake would pat his head. "She's not giving up, huh, Max?" he'd say. Max would bark once, like he agreed. The days turned into a week and Karen got bossier. She'd walk up and down the street with her clipboard telling everyone about Jake, awful heater. She'd stop neighbors and point at his house. "That thing's a problem," she'd say, her voice loud and grumpy. "He's breaking the rules." Most folks just nodded and hurried away. They didn't want to argue with Karen. She was too loud, too pushy. But Jake, he didn't care what she told people. He'd wave at her from his porch, a big smile on his face like nothing was wrong. That drove her nuts. Then one afternoon, something weird happened. Jake was out walking Max. The sun was low in the sky, turning everything orange and gold. Max trotted along, sniffing the grass, happy as can be. Jake held the leash loose, letting Max explore. They were just turning the corner by Karen's house when Jake saw it, a police car. It rolled up slow and quiet, not like in the movies with loud sirens and flashing lights. This was sneaky, like the cops didn't want anyone to notice. The car stopped right in front of Karen's house, and two officers stepped out. Jake slowed down. He didn't want to look nosy, but he couldn't help watching. The officers were big guys wearing dark uniforms with shiny badges. One had a notepad and the other knocked on Karen's door, 3 hard knocks. Jake stayed back, pretending to tie his shoe. Max sat down, tilting his head, curious too. Across the street, Karen's curtains moved a little. Jake saw her face peek out, pale and wide-eyed, like she'd seen a ghost. Then slam. The curtains shut fast, like she didn't want anyone to see her. The officers knocked again, louder this time. "Karen Baxter," one called. No answer. They waited a minute, then nodded to each other and walked back to their car. They didn't look happy, but they didn't force their way in. They just drove off, slow and quiet, like they'd come back later. Jake stood up, scratching his head. "What was that about, Max?" he said. Max barked softly, like he didn't know either. Jake frowned. Why were the cops at Karen's house? She was the one always threatening to call them on other people, like him and his heater. So why were they here for her? Jake didn't say a word to anyone about it. He didn't run to the neighbors or start asking questions. That wasn't his style. He just tucked it away in his brain like another little puzzle piece. Something big was brewing, he could feel it. Karen wasn't just some bossy lady with a clipboard. There was more to her, something she didn't want anyone to know. And Jake, he was starting to think his heater wasn't the only thing she was mad about. Back at home, Jake sat on his couch with Max. The smart heater hummed away, keeping the room warm. He grabbed one of Karen's letters and read it again. "Remove that eyesore," it said. He chuckled. "She's really worked up over this, huh?" he said to Max. But now, after seeing the cops, he wondered, was it really about the heater, or was Karen hiding something else? Something that made her shake, something that brought the police to her door. Outside, Karen stayed in her house. Her lights were on, but her curtains stayed shut tight. She didn't come out to yell or wave her clipboard. She didn't send another letter. It was quiet, too quiet. Jake noticed that too. He didn't know what was going on, but he kept his eyes open. He wasn't scared of Karen's threats anymore. He was curious. What was she up to? Why were the cops sneaking around? And why did she look so freaked out? The neighborhood felt different now. The air was thicker, like a storm was coming. Karen kept pushing, scribbling her notes and sending her letters. Jake kept watching, calm and steady, waiting for the next clue. Little things were popping up: the cops, her pale face, her shaky hands from before. They were small revelations, tiny hints that something bigger was hiding under the surface. Jake didn't have all the answers yet, but he was getting closer. And Karen, she had no idea he was on to her. Friday night came, and oh boy, that's when everything went crazy. Jake was chilling at home just like any other night. He was on his couch, Max snoozing next to him, the room all warm and cozy from his smart heater. The week had been weird with Karen's letters and the sneaky police visit, but Jake wasn't too worried. He figured it'd all blow over. Then his phone buzzed. He picked it up and looked at the screen. It was the smart heater app, the one he used to turn it on and off. The app said the heater was on, but Jake hadn't touched it. He hadn't turned it on at all. Jake frowned. "That's weird," he said to Max. Max opened one eye then went back to sleep. Jake didn't like this. Why was his heater on by itself? Was it broken? He grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen, pulled on his sneakers, and stepped outside to check. The night was dark and chilly, with stars twinkling up above. The street was quiet, too quiet. Jake flicked on the flashlight and pointed it at the heater by his porch. It was humming just like always, sending out warm air. Nothing looked wrong. So why did the app say he hadn't turned it on? Before he could figure it out, a loud voice cut through the silence. It was Karen. Her shrill yell came from her yard across the street. "I'm calling 911, she shouted into her phone. Jake's head snapped up. He saw her standing there, waving her arms like a wild person. "There's a dangerous device next door," she screamed. "It's making noises and I think it's a bomb." Jake froze. A bomb? His heater. He couldn't believe his ears. Was she serious? His little smart heater wasn't a bomb, it just kept his house warm. He opened his mouth to yell back, but then something stopped him cold. Headlights flashed down the street. 2 police cars zoomed in fast, tires screeching as they slammed to a stop. Jake's heart jumped, but the cars didn't park at his house. Nope, they pulled right up to Karen. Doors flew open and 4 officers jumped out, their boots thumping on the pavement. One of them, a tall guy with a loud voice, shouted, "Karen Baxter, step outside now." Karen's jaw dropped. She stood there in her yard, still holding her phone, looking like she'd seen a monster. "What?" she sputtered. "I'm the one who called you." Her voice was shaky, not bossy like usual. Jake blinked, confused. He stepped off his porch, flashlight in hand, and walked closer. The officers were all business, their faces serious. Karen looked back and forth between them and Jake, her eyes wide. Jake didn't get it. She'd called the cops on him, right? So why were they yelling at her? He had to know. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, calm as ever. "Officers," he said, his voice steady, "I think there's been a mix-up. That's just my heater. It's not a bomb. But why are you here for her?" The lead cop turned to Jake. He was a big guy with a shiny badge and a stern look. Then he faced Karen again, his voice hard and clear. "Ma'am," he said, "we've been investigating you for weeks. Those fines you've been collecting from neighbors, you've been pocketing them. That's theft." The words hit like a thunderclap. Karen's face went white, paler than snow. Her phone slipped a little in her hand and she stumbled back a step. "What?" she whispered. "No, that's not true." Jake's jaw dropped too. Fines, theft, he couldn't believe it. Then it clicked, those letters she sent him, the warnings about his heater, all the times she bossed people around. She'd been making people pay her money, saying it was for breaking rules. But she wasn't giving it to the HOA, she was keeping it for herself. Jake's surprise turned into a grin. The cops weren't here for his heater, they were here for Karen. She messed up big time. Karen shook her head fast. "This is a mistake," she yelled. "I didn't steal anything, I'm the victim here, he's the one with the bomb." She pointed at Jake, her finger trembling. The lead cop didn't even look at Jake. He stepped closer to Karen. "We've got proof," he said. "Bank records, complaints from neighbor. You've been taking cash for months, hundreds of dollars. It stops tonight." Another officer pulled out handcuffs, the metal glinting in the headlights. Karen's eyes got huge. "No," she cried. "Oh, you can't do this." Jake stood there watching it all unfold. Neighbors started peeking out their windows, lights flicking on up and down the street. Curtains moved and heads poked out, whispering to each other. They'd heard Karen's yelling and now they saw the cops. Jake's grin got bigger. He couldn't help it. Karen had been so loud, so mean, trying to scare him with her rules and her threats. And now, she was the one in trouble, big trouble. The second cop spoke up. "We got a call about a bomb," he said, glancing at Jake. "That's why we rushed over, but we were already coming for her." He nodded at Karen. "We've been watching her for a while." Jake held up his hands. "It's just a heater," he said. "I can show you." The cop waved him off. "No need, kid, we believe you. She's the one we want." Karen's knees wobbled. She looked around like she wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The officers closed in. "You're coming with us," the lead cop said. He took her arm and she yanked it back. "This is outrageous," she shouted. "I'm the president of the HOA. I make the rules." The cop didn't care. "Not anymore," he said, and he snapped the handcuffs on her wrists. Click, click, she was caught. Jake crossed his arms, still grinning. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. The truth was out, and it was wilder than he'd ever guessed. Karen wasn't just a bossy lady with a clipboard. She was a thief sneaking money from everyone she scared with her fake fines. And that call about a bomb, it backfired big time. She thought she'd get Jake in trouble, but she'd brought the cops right to her own door. The street buzzed with noise now, car engines, Karen's yells, neighbors chattering.